Short of hail, Austin has had a large history of hailstorms here in south central Texas. Let's talk about hail in particular. The hailstone that you see up there has actually been cut in half from a hailstorm that we had back a couple of years ago. What's interesting about this is that you can actually see how it's tree rings, almost like a tree ring effect. Those are the growth rings of the hailstone. All the hailstones start out very small in the very top parts of the thunderstorm. And as water accumulates on it, it grows, much like a popsicle or an icicle. So it accumulates as the very strong winds and the big severe thunderstorms push up on the stones and actually keep them lofted in the very tops up to 30 or 40,000 feet up. These winds can be so strong they can be upwards of 100 miles per hour, levitating these gigantic hailstones and allowing them to grow. As the winds die off, the hailstones fall back down to the ground at 100 miles per hour. So you do not want to be outside during a very, very large hailstorm. In fact, we've actually had deaths in Texas from large hail. You're outside, you get hit in the head or somewhere in the upper part here with a baseball or softball-sized hailstone. You can get concussion. You can also get killed. If you actually are driving, pull over. You'll make the dents bigger in your car if you try to drive through the hail. And if you see a greenish sky around a thunderstorm, that's typically a visual clue that you have a lot of ice out there. This is what we do not want to see in the city of Austin. This is a very large hailstorm coming through an area. This is about golf ball size. But watch the trees and the branches that start coming off. A lot of times you'll actually have the hail literally strip the trees of all the new leaves and new vegetation. So after a hailstorm has come through, it looks like wintertime because it looks like the trees have totally been stripped of every small branch. So this is the danger about living in south central Texas, but in many areas of the country where we actually have hailstorms. Your roof and your windows are primarily the two places where you'll see the most significant damage, and particularly the cars as well. Airplanes flying through thunderstorms, you do not want that. That's why your pilots tend to fly around thunderstorms. Of course, we know all the damage with cars, and even vinyl siding on the side of a house going to have pot marks as the hail sometimes blows literally sideways at 50 or 60 miles an hour. So it's like throwing a bunch of hard baseballs. And then we even have the air conditioning vents down outside of your homes with all that aluminum. It's very soft metal, and so that alone will also have a lot of damage to them. Well, if you happen to be outside during a thunderstorm, especially with large hail, this is what can happen. This gentleman was actually part of a cross-country jogging team at a track meet or a college up in Iowa, and they got caught in a hailstorm. And you can actually see the contusions and also the red marks of getting hit with hail at 100 miles per hour, what it will do. So it's definitely something that if you know severe weather is coming, you want to curtail all your outdoor activities. You want to be inside and to be able to stay away from any sort of danger, especially like this, because it will hurt, and particularly when those ice pellets and those ice chunks are hitting you at that speed. These are some of the largest hailstones ever recorded in the United States, 7 and 8 inches in diameter. So that's about the size of a cantaloupe or an extremely large Texas-sized grapefruit. So big, in fact, that it can actually break right through your roof before it hits ground. So this is very rare around here, but we do have some history of actually having softball-sized hail, and particularly baseball-sized hail around the country. These are typically the hail sizes that we always measure. We talk about mainly coin sizes, and then we get into the larger sizes. I always like to kid that we always talk about the sporting goods sizes, right? The golf ball, the tennis ball, and the baseball. And then, in fact, even around here, we can have softball to grapefruit size hail. They're not always perfectly circular. Sometimes they're even this weird star shape down here. So what about Austin? Well, yesterday was March 25th, and we made it through. Because if you look at these dates, March 25th, 2009, March 25th, 1993, and in 2005, these are the three largest hailstones in Austin's history, upwards of all $100 million damage in the city of Austin. And believe it or not, they all occurred on a March 25th. So every year that we get through a March 25th in Austin, I always put a sigh of relief out there because the history has shown that for some reason, that is a date that is key on Austin's calendar about getting severe weather in and around the Austin and south central Texas area. Many times when we have thunderstorms, we talk about wind damage. Part of the definition of a severe thunderstorm is actually having wind speeds of 58 mile per hour or greater. That's basically where we start to have very weak damage across the area. Trees down, power lines down, some fences blown over. In fact, most of that damage actually comes from this. These are called microbursts and downbursts. It's very deadly even to aircraft, because as the rain shaft, as the downburst, as the water releases from the storm in a very violent motion, it hits ground and spreads out. And so if you're underneath where that rain shaft is, and it's a very intense rain shaft, that is in fact where we can have the wind damage. This is going to be a great video clip of if you are near a microburst, this is the type of hurricane force winds that you may actually have. These are upwards of 70 to 100 mile per hour winds with just a line of thunderstorms blowing through a forest. This is not with a tornado, it's not with a hurricane, just a line of thunderstorms. And so literally what will happen is that as you see this coming out from the thunderstorm and down, it almost looks like a ball of water falling from the sky. That's the intense rain shaft as it is actually falling down to the ground. So if you're actually underneath that, it'd be almost like getting poured with water out of a bucket, a lot of force. And if you're underneath that area, that's where you could actually have the downed trees, downed power lines, and even damage to your home. This is exactly what happened to the Dallas Cowboy practice field back a couple of years ago. 70 mile per hour winds as a rain shaft, an intense rain shaft, and a microburst fell right on top of the Dallas Cowboy practice field. Did a lot of damage, even injured some coaches and players while that was there. And this picture is actually from a cell phone. And you can actually see how the rain shaft is very intense and how it's actually spreading out down toward the ground. So the stadium was right underneath there. So it'll look a little bit different, not the typical rain shaft that we typically see from a thunderstorm, but very intense. And if you're under it, it'll be blinding rain and probably going sideways. You've probably even driven through some before in your lifetime as you've had to pull over because the rain is so intense and so blinding. This is the typical type of damage that we have in the Austin area and all across the country with severe thunderstorms. I'll call it a lot of nuisance type damage. We do have trees that are blown down. We have trees uprooted. We have fences being blown down, and even trampolines. One thing to talk about with the playscapes and all the play equipment that you have in your backyard, much of it is not tied down. So when very strong winds come through an area, they very easily will get lofted and even thrown over your house and maybe even hit someone else's house. So it's important to know that if severe weather is coming through, to pick up all that loose debris, because it will be tossed up and then actually thrown almost like missiles, and that will cause the majority of damage. It's also important to know about the types of trees you have in your yard. If you have large trees that are dead or dying near your house, take those down immediately, because as strong winds come through, that's what could blow through, push the tree over or uproot it onto your house or onto your car and cause additional damage. There are some types of trees that are much weaker than others. Hackberry trees and ash trees are historically very weak trees and will break at only about 45 or 50 mile per hour winds, opposed to maybe a nice oak tree that has very strong wood that'll be able to sustain probably 60, 70, even 80 mile per hour winds before it breaks. So get to know your trees and to make sure they're far enough away from your house that in case a large branch does fall down, that it doesn't do additional damage. Now, if the wind speeds get much stronger into the 70 to 90 mile per hour range, now you're talking about big danger to especially mobile homes and travel trailers. Unfortunately, this is where I usually have my first loss of life and injuries. It's because you're in a building that is now being moved by the wind. It can literally pick up and roll. Okay? When wind comes underneath the house and up and over it, it's actually created an aircraft wing effect and creates lift. There's a picture of a house with some roof tiles off and some shingles off. That's typically the same type of damage with the same wind speeds. So you can see in a house that's on a slab, it's much safer. But anything that is designed to move, like an airplane, like a mobile home, like a travel trailer, will start to move and can tumble, and thus the danger of being in those sort of areas during severe wind.